Hi, my name is Geert Van Gele. I would like to discuss the interpretation of Italian early Baroque repertoire. This video is part of a series that accompany the iBook Thoughts on the Recorder, which is available through my webshop kettenbergrecordings.be. You can find a link in the description, and I've also included a clickable link at the end of this video if you want to learn more about it. This era holds the cradle of the Baroque. Trying to break free from the rigid rules of the polyphonic Renaissance, this radical new style gave all the attention and freedom to the solo melody, with an accompaniment that was there to support, underline where necessary, or quietly fill out, with a simple harmony. Early Baroque music asked for some specific approaches. For us recorder players, there are first of all the specific instruments that evolved from the Renaissance. Early Baroque recorders are in essence still Renaissance recorders, but with a bit more flexibility in their tone production, and often an easier high register. When compared to regular Baroque recorders, these, let me call them late Renaissance recorders, have a more direct tone production, which also makes it easier to differentiate between articulations. The sound is definitely more open and invites the player to work more with articulations than with their Baroque counterparts. Baroque instruments invite the player more to work with sound shaping, dynamic alterations in the sound. In this sense, it's important to let yourself be guided by the instrument. When I say invite, I really mean this. Listen to what the instrument tells you. Listen to how it wants to sound like, rather than how you want the instrument to sound. Interpretation-wise, we need to keep certain pointers in mind. Needless to say that, as with any piece of music in any given style, it is most important to get to a proper interpretation by analyzing the piece. The method outlined in video 22 can be applied. Often though, it will be hard to capture the real meaning of a piece when first confronted with it, especially since repertoire is more or less conceived as an improvisation. In order to get the best results, I suggest to take the following pointers into account. When first attempting to learn an early Italian piece, I strongly suggest to follow a strict tempo. We often think of early Italian Baroque as a style where complete freedom is the ultimate performance. We should never forget, however, that this music, which is in its original notation still mostly written without bar lines, asked for a Tactus as a general tempo. This tempo, which has been described in treatises as the tempo of a heartbeat, should be somewhere between 40 and 60 beats per minute. The solo repertoire of the period will often have some tempo changes built in, often accompanied by a new Italian term, allegro or adagio. Even with these tempo changes, the music will most often than not work very well when stuck to a strict tactus. In many instances, the slow adagio will be half as slow as the allegro. A new time signature will sometimes be introduced to clarify. By keeping a constant tempo throughout a piece, I'm convinced that it will be easier to get a grip on the analysis and the structure of it. Once you have mastered it in this way, you will have a strong basis from which you can divert from, and introduce some rhythmic freedom in certain passages. And this without losing the big picture. As having explained above, for late Baroque repertoire, having a close connection with the bass and having a deep understanding of its harmonic function, this is key for coming to a valid interpretation. In early Baroque repertoire, bass lines are often not much more than some isolated notes, few and far apart. Not much of a melody here. In this case, I suggest first of all to incorporate the rhythm of the bass with the top line. Feel where the bass is providing you with supportive moments. Stepping stones, if you wish. Even if you have a hard time reading a bass clef, one can easily see the places in the score where the bass notes are occurring, while simultaneously playing the top line. These places provide a rhythmic support, which one can feel when interpreting the solo voice. Give some extra weight on these moments while playing. I often mark these notes by clapping when I'm teaching or tapping my foot when I'm practicing myself. The next step is to grow awareness of the harmonic color, which each of these bass notes represents. How much harmonic tension do you experience? How do these notes, these chords, relate to one another? The introduction of a measure of 3, which occurs most of the time in every piece, can easily lead to confusion. How fast must this newly introduced measure be played in comparison to the measures in 4? There is an easy rule, however, which in most instances will take care of this. Going into a measure of 3, consider 2 of the 3 beats of this new measure to be equal to 2 beats of your measure in 4. Even though this seems to equal out as a quarter note remaining the same for both measures, this may not be the case since notations in this time signatures may be written differently, like quarter notes against half notes. Equally so, this rule of thumb can be applied for the reverse situation when going from a measure in 3 back into 4. A measure in 3 to me translates always as a point of resolution in the piece, and this should be treated likewise. One builds up towards a 3, often with virtuosic and dramatic sequences, in order to release the tension during the measure of 3, the dance. If in a slower piece a measure of 3 doesn't have the build-up towards a dance, it will at least be a relaxing part. This measure also has a strong connotation with the Holy Trinity. The measure in 3 is a tempus perfectum, the perfect time, an earlier notation resembled by the full circle, hence the representation of the measure in 4 as a half circle, C, or the tempus imperfectum. Even though in an early Baroque sonata or canzona is built up of several contrasting sections, preparing the road for the later fully separated movements of the sonata, it is important to realize that an early sonata or canzona is conceived as a whole through composed piece. Think of it as a train of thought, where one thought leads to another, like in a daydream. The different parts need to be connected through a logical storyline. When you are able to make this work, you will find it a lot easier to come up with a convincing interpretation, where the big sections connect logically. Once you have established a steady tactus while studying an early Italian piece, once you understood the correlation between the contrasting sections and came up with a logical idea of a storyline of the whole piece, you are ready now to augment your story. As with the later Baroque sonatas, you want to make as many references as possible as with text. You want to interpret with pizzazz, play with color, motion, emotion, light and dark, soft and loud, agogic accents. Think of it as a recitative. All the emotions that are captured in the text of the recitative you want to put in the music. To achieve this, feel free to make some rhythmic liberty. Stretch your time, so you feel where the melody might benefit from this. Maybe bring out a specific agogic note. Play with a whole sequence that could benefit from speeding up or slowing down. Maybe you want to ease a transition between two contrasting sections, maybe an overdotting of a dotted rhythm. Whichever one of the above suggestions you want to consider, always make sure that you guide the listener by the hand. If you make too sudden a change in tempo, you will lose a listener. Any freedom needs to be taken with great care and logical flow. And be careful not to drift away too far from the steady tactus. The closer you can stick to a steady tactus, the easier it will be for the listener to follow your thoughts. an early Baroque repertoire, there are two types of ornamentations, the Accenti and the passagi. Passagi are longer sections of diminutions, rhythmical passages and shorter note values, articulated and mostly stepwise with few leaps. These are often written out in early Baroque repertoire and are directly connected with the Renaissance era. The Accenti are short ornaments, trills and the likes, which draw the attention to certain notes and harmonies. Trills in early Baroque repertoire are in a way similar to the ones of the Renaissance. Because this repertoire is so elaborate with its written-out virtuosic passages, the composers often took the trouble to write out trills as well. In principle, the trill needs to have a steady rhythm, starting from the main note, often prolonging this first note and alternating with the next note up the scale. For instance, say you have a cadence where a D resolves into a C. The trill would start on the D, slightly lengthened. The final note should be longer, of course. Early Italian repertoire always sounds best if all the fast notes are being articulated, including the trills mentioned here. A specific kind of trill is one which is performed on the note itself with repeated unisons. That's it for now. If you follow the link, you can watch the next video on the interpretation of Rococo music. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.